Hello everyone, glad to be back. Today is 2nd of August, now it's 10 o'clock in the morning Moscow time. I'm Levan Gudadze and this is my first update for the day in which I will share all the main news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms. Second update will be a little bit late in the afternoon on my Patreon page. Unfortunately, I was unable to make update for Patreon yesterday, but I will make up for it today, and of course in second update I will share additional news that will be reported by Russian media. If you are interested to subscribe on my Patreon and support this project, you can see link under this video in the description box or in the pinned comment. Of course, I will be immensely grateful for your support. That's been said, let's talk about news now, and I will start with a quick summary of the situation on the front line, and I will definitely try to make it as short as possible. After all, there are many other channels that devoting much more time to detailed analysis of situation on the battlefield. So let's begin from southern sectors up to northern ones. Kherson region, no major changes. It's artillery duels between the sides, local scale battles for control over these small islands in the Dnieper River, in delta of the Dnieper River, and recon operations. Nothing in the scale that will influence overall situation on this sector of the front. When it comes to Zaporozhye and South Donetsk sectors of the front, it's also operational pause. During the previous weeks, Rabotin direction was especially active. Ukrainian forces were trying as much as they can to establish control over this settlement, to at least to encircle this settlement, but they did failed. And according to news that we are receiving, and according to video and photo materials that we did see from this sector of the front line, which by the way have been called the Bradley Square by many, including Dima from Military Summary. I guess he did come up with this name first. And well, we can probably say that Zelensky's regime did lost, if you combine military equipment and manpower, then they did lost more than a brigade just in direction of Rabotin during previous 7 to 10 days. And I guess if Zelensky's regime wants to continue this local scale offensive operations, they have to use a couple of brigades from the strategic reserves that they have left. And I believe in strategic reserve of Ukrainian forces now are 8 to 10 more or less battle ready brigades, and that's maximum. So let's see if Zelensky's regime will send its reserves in direction of Rabotin, because otherwise Ukrainian forces in this sector would not be able to continue this suicidal frontal attacks on Russian strongholds. So when it comes to South Donetsk sector of the front, main hot point, of course, Vremevsky Ledge, where during the previous days Ukrainian forces did manage to establish partial control over the Staromayorsk. This quite small settlement, as you can see. It's only couple of streets there, but this settlement do have a strategic meaning in this sector, because if Ukrainian forces were able to dig in and establish stronghold, then Russian side will find it extremely difficult to protect Urozhaina, this settlement on the eastern part of Staromayorsk, and that's why I guess Russian forces were very active to strike Ukrainian positions in Staromayorsk area with everything they have: aviation, artillery, tank, mortars, just you name it. And that's why Ukrainian forces were unable to stay and establish strongholds in this settlement. And Staromayorsk is in gray zone, in gray zone. But yet again, we had report during previous days that Ukrainian side was sending a significant number of manpower in this direction, and the situation may change anytime, really. We may see another wave of Ukrainian offensive in this sector. But by the way, I will remind you that this Vremevsky Ledge, not even on the first line of defense of Russian militaries, and they have at least 5 or 6 lines of defense in this land bridge between Crimea and mainland Russia. Now let's talk about Donetsk direction. Of course, main hot points traditionally are Marinka, which is here, by the way. As you can see, about 90% of Marinka is under Russian control. Ukrainian forces are holding on to some small pocket in the western side of this settlement. Well, I believe once situation finally will resolve this with this Ukrainian so-called counteroffensive, Russian side probably will become much more active in the direction of Marinka, in the direction of Krasnogorovka, maybe even in the direction of Avdiivka, which is here, by the way, and in operational encirclement. But for now, it's local scale skirmishes, artillery duels, and recon operations between the sides. Nothing is happening in the scale that will influence overall situation on the front line. Now let's talk about Bakhmut sector. Well, Ukrainian forces were quite active in southern flank of Bakhmut. As we know, they did have some local scale successes in this direction, especially in areas of Klishchevka and Andreevka. Just look at it, man. This is Andreevka, for example. Quite small village, and this is Klishchevka, also quite small settlement, but they do have a strategic meaning, and that's why I guess Russian side, despite expectations that Russian forces will withdraw from Klishchevka, they did not, and they did give a fight to offensive Ukrainian forces. And well, yesterday, for example, there were reports that Ukrainian brigade Lyut, which is based on special forces of Ukraine's interior ministry, if I'm not mistaken, that brigade was basically decimated. And according to reports that I see on many different Telegram pages, that brigade basically are unable to continue offensive operation or to be involved in this operations on the front line in any way, because they lost by different accounts from 300 to 500 military personnel and plenty of weapons. And I'm talking about KIA and Winded. So I guess initiative is changing hands once again in southern sector of the front, and if the Zelensky regime will not send additional, I don't know, 5th or 6th or 7th wave of these reinforcements in this direction, I don't think Ukrainian forces will be able to continue their offensive operations. When it comes to northern sector of the front, initiative is in Russian hands, and lately, during the previous days, not just previous 24 hours, but even previous couple of days, we didn't even see more or less significant attempts from Ukrainian forces to conduct local scale offensive. So Dubova, Vasilievka, Berkhovka, Yakhidna, they are under full Russian control, and Russian forces are even managing to improve their defensive lines in this sector. I believe it's only a matter of time. And Russian forces will begin their offensive in both flanks of Bakhmut. And before end of this summer, that this is my expectation, that before end of this summer, Chisov Yar and Konstantinovka will become on the front line, will become hot points on this sector of the front. When it comes to Seversk direction, main hot point, of course, Belogorovka area, Siribyanka area, and by the way, this forestry, of course, where sides are constantly fighting to improve their positions, and initiative is, as I said quite a few times, totally in Russian hands, especially in the northern sectors of the front. And even though during the previous day or two, Russian forces were not that active on the central and northern sectors, of the front from Liman, let's say, to Kupiansk. I can explain it with the necessity to establish control over Belogorovka and entire this forestry here, and I believe it's becoming too important now at this stage of special military operation to at least encircle Seversk. So I guess before Russian side will continue its local scale offensives in Liman Kupiansk direction, we will see activization of Russian side in direction of Seversk. It seems logical. It seems logical to me because if you take a look at this map, you can clearly see that Seversk is a kind of bridgehead of Ukrainian forces in otherwise Russian-held territory, and this bridgehead has to be dismantled. It's even though I'm not military expert, it seems logical to me. And by the way, during the previous night, let me open my Telegram. Russian forces did strike logistical and military infrastructure of Zelensky's regime in several directions in Ukraine, and among them in Odessa region and in Kyiv region. I did share a few photo and video material on my Telegram about it. If you are interested, you can check it out. This morning, some media outlets did report that even Zelensky was forced to admit that some significant damage was done to logistical infrastructure in southern direction in Odessa region. Izmail was main target, I believe, logistical infrastructure in Izmail. And this is it for quick summary of the situation on the front line. I remind you that military summary, Alexander Mercuris do much better work when it comes to a detailed analysis of situation on the front line that I will ever be able to do so. And I highly recommend those channels. They are making updates on daily basis, so I watch them on every day. So I do recommend, if you want to learn in detail about these local scale skirmishes, then I definitely recommend those channels. You can see links on my video in description box. Let's talk about some other news now. And RIA Novosti is reporting that yes, as I just said, Russian forces did strike logistical and military infrastructure of Zelensky's regime in Odessa region and in Kyiv region. And according to RIA Novosti, in Odessa region, some industrial complex was hit during the strikes, industrial and logistical, and fire did erupted as a result of strike. And even if Zelensky was forced to acknowledge significant damage, then I guess Russian forces were quite successful during those strikes. But I don't think, by the way, this is retaliation for yesterday's strike on Moscow. I guess these strikes were planned way ahead. As you know, yesterday Zelensky's regime did conduct yet another strike on Russian capital with drones. All drones were neutralized, but unfortunately one of the drones did manage to, even though it was suppressed according to Russian officials, it did manage to hit a high-rise office building in Moscow city, financial district of Russian capital. I did report about it yesterday. So let me continue now. And TASS news agencies reporting that Russian forces did manage to neutralize five Ukrainian armored groups in direction of Krasnoliman when they were trying to conduct local scale offensive. As I said, the initiative in central and south and the northern parts of the sector are totally in Russian hands, and Ukrainian forces basically have no chance to regain initiative, all the attempts to improve their positions or to push Russian forces back, ending up in total failure, and this information just confirming this. Let me continue. RIA Novosti is also reporting that Russian armed forces did manage to establish control over the 8 strongholds of Ukrainian armed forces in direction of Svatova, if I'm not mistaken, which is once again confirming what I have said many times before. Initiative in the northern sectors of the front is totally in Russian hands. This is also interesting. TASS news agency is reporting that yesterday in Kherson region, Mi-24 attack helicopter of Zelensky's regime was shot down. I did share a video of that incident on my Telegram page. You can check that out if you are interested. And I guess this helicopter was one of from that bunch that was delivered to Zelensky's regime by Poland a couple of weeks ago, but this is my guess. We don't really have any official information from Ukrainian side about origin of that Mi-24. Let me continue. RIA Novosti is reporting that this is very significant also. So according to Russian Defense Ministry, during previous day, Ukrainian forces were trying to strike Russian merchant ship in the Black Sea with drones, naval drones. Russian warships that were securing this passage of Russian ships did destroy these drones. But information itself is quite disturbing because, under desperation, Zelensky's regime is becoming more and more dangerous. They are not just provoking Moscow by striking in direction of capital, but as you can see, they are now willing to attack civilian ships in the Black Sea. This is pure evil, pure terror activity, and unfortunately, these criminals that are running and ruining Ukraine still are receiving support from the West, from the Western world, which is truly unfortunate. Let's continue. TASS news agency is reporting that official representative of Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, did made statements about US take on Wagner PMC, and the statements from Poland, according to which Wagnerites are being deployed. Wagner units have been deployed to close to border between Belarus and Poland, and in recent days we did see some reports from Poland that, according to some Polish officials, Wagner fighters are planning some provocation for whatever reason on Polish soil, which is of course creation of or preparation of the ground from Polish side for a false flag, I believe, because I'm not gonna take seriously all those statements that Wagnerites gonna attack Poland and do some crazy stuff there without being provoked. But US did comment on these statements from Warsaw, and US officials did said that US will take Wagner's attack on Poland as a Russian attack on Poland. And Maria Zakharova did comment on this, and she said that US has a totally inadequate approach to entire this issue, and according to Zakharova, these statements that are coming in from Washington are not based on any reality whatsoever. It's a pure fantasy, basically. That's my interpretation of Zakharova's word, but I guess that's what she meant, because in reality it's true. There is no Wagner units inside Poland. Wagner units are not planning to do anything against Poland if they are not provoked. If Belarus is attacked by Poland or through Poland, then of course Wagnerites will defend Belarus. No questions about that. But why would Belarus or Poland do some provocations against NATO member states? It just don't make any sense, isn't it? It just don't. But well, time after time we did see that these Western so-called elites are coming up with crazy statements, and they probably think that because they say so, public will believe them, which is a very mistaken approach to reality, because no one, I guess no one even in the USA trusts and believes Biden's administration. No one from sane people. Some crazies maybe believe in them, but no adequate people will ever trust Biden administration and the statements. Let me continue now. And by the way, this episode reminds me, if you remember that episode in Syria when with Russian support, Assad forces, Syrian forces were conducting very successful operations all over the country, and in Duma some chemical provocation did happen, and it happened after a few days when U.S. president did said that the use of chemical weapons will be some red line and then blah blah, and exactly after a few days some chemical provocation did take place. And who did blame Washington? Of course, Syrian government, when it did not make any sense for Syrian government to conduct such an operation and provoke USA. But and by the way, IAEA experts did confirm that Syria did not use any chemical weapons, and those experts was fired from not IAEA but one of the international organizations. I cannot remember that name. They were on the ground there. They conducted some expertise, and they did said that there was no use of chemical weapons from Syrian side, and those experts were fired from that organization. Let me continue now, and this is TASS News Agency's report. A quite interesting one. EU officials are calling Moscow not to use these drone strikes on Moscow, on Russian capital, as a justification for a further escalation of conflict in Ukraine. Well, I truly have some doubts about adequacy of EU bureaucrats, to be honest. How are you gonna ask Kremlin not to escalate when and not to take these strikes on Moscow serious enough? I don't know what kind of sane individual will ask such a stuff country that was under attack. It's insane, isn't it? But that's what EU officials are asking Moscow not to take, basically, these strikes on Moscow seriously, and not to escalate on in a zone of special military operation. Crazy statements, but well, it is what it is. We did not see retaliatory strikes from Moscow yet, but well, and as I said, during previous updates, I'm not surprised by this. Maybe maybe Moscow are not escalating further just because Kremlin possibly wants to leave some gap for possible negotiations. Maybe Putin or some people in his inner circle still are believing that negotiations are possible. Well, I'm not that optimistic, really. I don't think Moscow can ever trust Western elites or current regime in Kyiv. But yet again, decisions are made not by me, decisions made by Putin, and he is definitely careful. He is definitely trying to keep this special military operation in boundaries which will leave a gap for a possibility of negotiations. And I think maybe Kremlin is thinking that if Moscow will escalate significantly, then this window for negotiations may be lost forever. And that's why possibly, that's why Moscow may be acting kind of softly when it comes to retaliatory measures or escalation. Not just in Ukraine, but escalation towards Western elites, let's say. But I may be mistaken, I don't know. After all, Putin is not sharing his strategies with me, of course. So let me continue. TASS news agency is reporting that Warsaw yesterday did blame Belarus, Belarusian helicopters for crossing border with Poland, and well, we did see a response from Minsk. Belarusian officials denied allegations. They said that helicopters, Belarusian helicopters, were staying in Belarusian airspace, and more than that, Belarus did inform the Warsaw that military exercises were conducted in the western regions of the country. And well, I was not there. I cannot say what did take place, but to be honest, I don't see why Belarus will escalate with Poland. It does not make any sense. As I just said a few minutes ago, it does make no sense for Belarus to escalate with Poland. That's why I'm absolutely sure all these rumors that Wagnerites gonna enter Poland and do some provocations there, this is all crap, total crap. Wagnerites are in Belarus to train Belarusian army, and maybe to participate in possible offensive operations in direction of Chernigov region, for example, Sumy region, maybe even in direction of Kyiv, who knows. And possibly one of the main goals for Wagnerites in a case of Polish intervention in Belarus will be, or Polish invasion in Ukraine. In that case, Wagnerites may become more active, and they may try to establish control over this so-called Suwalski corridor that connects Belarus with Kaliningrad region of Russian Federation. As you can see, this small area here, it's only about 100 kilometers wide, if I'm not mistaken. It's called Suwal corridor, and I believe if Poland will escalate with Belarus or with Russia, with whatever steps, in that case, yes, Wagnerites may become active and they may try to establish control over that Suwal corridor, but this is if they are provoked, if Russia is provoked. Otherwise, of course, Belarus and Wagnerites gonna stay in within the borders of Belarus. It's too obvious, isn't it? But let me continue. And by the way, we have reports about response from Warsaw over claims that Belarusian helicopters did cross border with Poland, and we have reports, for example, from RIA Novosti, that Polish Defense Ministry will send additional military personnel in the direction of borders with Belarus. And well, by the way, if this information is not confirming that this story about Belarusian helicopters was a kind of false flag operation to justify deployment of additional troops towards Belarusian borders, then I don't know what you're gonna call it. It was a pure provocation from Warsaw to justify deployment of additional troops in the direction of Belarus. That's all it is, really. And very interesting developments. I mean, Poland is very active, very popular in Russian media in last 24 hours, and this information is also about Poland and Ukraine, by the way, because yesterday Foreign Ministry of Ukraine did subpoena Polish ambassador to come to Foreign Ministry and explain statements of some Polish officials about Ukraine, that Ukraine is not grateful enough for support that it's getting from Poland. And well, Kyiv officials, because they truly lost contact with reality, they probably think that they are in position to subpoena Polish ambassador and teach him a lesson. And of course, Warsaw did not take it lightly, or Warsaw did not like it, and they call Ukraine's ambassador. They subpoena Ukraine's ambassador to come to Polish Foreign Ministry, and well, they did give a lesson to Ukraine's ambassador how to behave. And this is, by the way, when I see this information, this diplomatic row between Ukraine and Poland, it did remind me these predictions, including my predictions, that it's only a matter of time when Poland will send its troops in western Ukraine. And in order to do so, of course, Warsaw needs some reasoning behind it. And well, step by step, I guess Warsaw will start distancing itself from Kyiv. Not in a single day, of course, not in a single month, but before Polish invasion in western Ukraine, I'm quite sure relationships between Warsaw and Kyiv will deteriorate quite significantly. And of course, by the way, Polish Foreign Ministry also called for Belarusian ambassador to talk about those helicopters, but of course we all know that it was false flag from Warsaw, just to justify this the deployment of additional troops in direction of Belarus. And by the way, recently we had so many reports about creation of new units in Polish army to be deployed in that Suwal corridor. We are almost on weekly basis now hearing news about deployment of additional troops towards eastern borders of Poland, right next to Belarus, right next to Ukraine. And well, for me personally, this news, these informations definitely are indicators that Warsaw is actively preparing its invasion of western Ukraine. And who knows, Polish elites are so crazy, they may even conduct some provocations against Belarus. I would not be surprised if that will happen. Let me continue, and this is TASS News Agency's report, according to which officials in Pentagon did make statement that Zelensky's regime will receive F-16 fighter jets only when Ukrainian pilots will go through all the cycle of training, which we can interpret as never. And that's it. really, when I read this information, I was thinking, this is basically confirmation of what I was saying for so long now, that Zelensky's regime will never have in its hands Western-made fighter jets, just never. And all these talks about F-16s, F-18s, Rafales, Mirage 2000s, Gripens and so on, it's just noise. It's just a noise. And by the way, as I said many times before, we will see introduction of Western-made fighter jets to the battlefield in Ukraine only when Poland and some other NATO member states that have created this anti-Russian coalition will send their troops into Western Ukraine. Simultaneously, they will probably try to establish no-fly zone over the Western Ukraine, and that's the only time we will see, or first time we will see introduction of these fighter jets, and they will be, of course, controlled by these NATO member states, not by Zelensky's regime. And when it comes to this incursion of NATO member states into Western Ukraine, I believe, as I said many times before, if they will stay in the Western Ukraine, probably it will be possible to avoid direct clashes between Russian forces and forces of these NATO member states. But if they will move further east towards central or southern regions of Ukraine, Kyiv and Odessa regions, for example, then I guess it will be extremely difficult or even impossible to avoid direct clashes between Russian military personnel and military forces of those countries. So there are some dangers lying ahead, and well, let's hope that elites of Poland, Romania, Slovakia are not suicidal, and they will not provoke direct clashes with the Russian forces, because they are not Ukraine. Russia will respond very, very differently if they will provoke military conflict with Russia. But they should always remember that they will be treated very differently. They are not Ukraine, they are not Ukrainians. Even though I'm 100% sure nobody in Russia wants any conflict with any country whatsoever. And well, I hope even this conflict in Ukraine will end today, but unfortunately it's impossible. Let me continue now, and TASS news agency is reporting that, well, officials in Pentagon did come up with another quite interesting statement that Russia's special military operation did prove that military-industrial complex of USA is not functioning in a proper level. And well, I guess Pentagon official was trying to say that military-industrial complex is not able to provide enough ammunition and weapons to be sent to Ukraine. But yet again, by the way, Pentagon is full of lobbyists for corrupt criminals, basically, and that are lobbying interests of military-industrial complex. And this statement I will take as a partially true, because it is true. US is not capable to producing, for example, enough shells for 155 millimeter howitzers, but that's because they have no need in that. But US military-industrial complex is very effective to produce some other type of ammunition or weapons that Pentagon was keen to have in its inventory. And by these statements, I guess they are preparing ground for a significant decrease in orders for military-industrial complex. And I believe Raytheon and General Dynamics or General Electric or whatever companies they are, whatever names they have, Boeing and so on, Lockheed Martin and they will receive additional tens and possibly hundreds of billions of dollars in coming years for nothing, just to become a little bit richer. And they have a justification for it. A special military operation of Russian Federation did prove that U.S. military industrial complex did some additional investments. I mean, it's crazy, but it is what it is. I guess not that many people in U.S. gonna even notice this development. Let me continue. And TASS news agency is reporting that Trump, by the way, former and possibly future president of U.S., against Trump, 4 additional charges have been brought. It's all about this 6th January incident when Protestants enter Capitol building, and those Protestants, I believe, were provoked by FBI informants. These neoliberals and neocons are trying to use that incident as one of the reasons why Trump should be charged and removed from presidential race. Basically, that's all they care, to somehow remove Trump from presidential races. And it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, it was US that was always positioning itself like beacon of democracy, and whenever in any country some opposition politicians, especially pro-US or US-controlled opposition figures, were arrested or charged, it was Washington that always coming up with statements that it's unlawful action and blah blah blah. It's where is the human rights? Where is democracy? And what happened to the US? They are now trying to prosecute their main opposition candidate for presidency and former president. And this is pure political prosecution. I mean, you may like it, Trump, you may don't like him. Me personally, I don't have opinion about it. I just don't care. I'm not US citizen, so it's none of my business who will be president there. I just hope that people in White House will be sane so that this world will be more secure. That's what my interest is. And I'm quite sure Trump is definitely much more adequate person than Biden or anybody in his administration. I mean, it's just true, factual true. And but yet again, man, we are seeing political prosecution of major opposition candidate in the US, country that was positioning itself as a beacon of democracy and freedom and so on. And what did happen to US, man? I don't know. These neoliberals and neocons, they are destroying USA from within, man. It's just too obvious for everybody outside of US. I don't know what US citizens are thinking about all of it, but I mean, from outside it seems like US do have internal enemies that are destroying that country. I don't know why, man. And let's continue. TASS news agency is reporting that head of general staff of Algiers army had a meeting with Said Shangriha, did have a meeting with the Defense Minister of Russian Federation, Shoigu, and this is an important meeting because this visit of head of Algiers general staff to Moscow is taking place during these disturbances in Niger, by the way, and Algiers is bordering with Niger. Let me show you on the map. So this is Niger, by the way, and this is Algiers here. And Algiers government, if I'm not mistaken, made a clear statement that if any country will try to invade Niger, then they will support Niger. And the head of general staff of this country is in Moscow and have a meeting with Russian Defense Ministry, which is I guess somewhat connected with not just obviously not just with the cooperation between Russian and Algiers militaries, but also with the situation in Niger. So let's see how the situation develop, and let's hope that none of the neighboring countries with Niger that are under significant influence of the Western elites, so-called Western elites, none of them will even try to invade that state, and let's hope France will stay away. They are evacuating the citizens. EU states basically began to evacuate their citizens from Niger, and let's hope France will stay away from that state. Otherwise, entire Central, Western, and Northern Africa may be distracted and may end up in significant regional conflicts. So, couple of more news. Let's see how long is this video. Too long, by the way, but just a few more news. So, RT is reporting that Russia will complete a nuclear power plant, building of a nuclear power plant in Turkey next year. As you know, Russian Rosatom is a major player when it comes to nuclear technologies and building nuclear power stations all around the world. Just recently, during the Russia-Africa summit, some delegations from African states had negotiations with Rosatom, and maybe sometime in the future, Russia will begin building nuclear power stations in African states, also in some African states also. And despite all the attempts from Western elites, so-called elites, to isolate Russia, time after time we are seeing factual proofs that if anyone is isolated or beginning to be isolated, it's Western elites, really. It's Western elites. Let's continue, and this is gonna be last news for today's first update. Also, RT is reporting that Russia sets a new record in gas deliveries to China. Yesterday I did report that oil exports from Russia to China did hit a record high, and today we have information that gas exports to China also are hitting all-time high numbers, which is at one hand, of course, it's great for both sides, but in other hand, I hope this dependence on each other would not reach a critical point, and I hope economies of China and Russia will be diverse enough so that this interdependence of Russian and Chinese economies will not become an issue or problem in the or generator of risks, let me put it this way, in the future. And this is it, by the way, for now. I hope you will find this update interesting, and if so, please click that like button, leave some commentary about any topic you like. More likes and comments definitely make change and allow me to reach a wider audience. And if you can, please share links to my videos or my channel with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, or any other platform that you are active on. I will be immensely grateful for your support, and if you think this channel is interesting, has some potential and deserves to exist in this field of news and political commentary, please consider to support with small donations through PayPal, by subscribing to my Patreon page, or through Buy Me a Coffee. You will see links under this video or in the pinned comment. This is it for now. Have a great day and take care.